All right, welcome. We're back again with another exciting interview, and we're here today with Hannah Marie. Hi, Hannah.
Guys.
So excited to have you on, and we're going to dive right in and get just information about you and talk a little bit more about your experience in photography. But let's tell everyone a little bit more about you and what you're all about. So Hannah is an award-winning Canadian portrait photographer whose timeless style has attracted clients from around the world for over 10 years. Her passion for teaching and connecting with people has made her a popular educator who can be found on CreativeLIVE and at ImagingUSA and Shutterfest. Her expertise are in delivering high-end experience, in-person sales, and business organization. So welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. So why don't we start off by just you telling us a little bit in your own words, a little bit about your expertise, your experience, and maybe something about your business that not many people know about.
Well, and am I the first Canadian that you've had on the show?
You are the first
Yes.
Canadian.
There you go. Yeah, so my expertise currently, I say currently because it's kind of changed over the years as it does for everyone, is portraiture. And specifically children and maternity. That's what you'll see on my website. It's all full of that. I also shoot families and headshots and all sorts of other things, but I only show what I really, really want to attract. And one thing that you wouldn't necessarily know, I guess I started out over 10 years ago and shot literally everything that you could imagine, and then wanted to focus on something and chose weddings. And did that for 2 or 3 years. That's what I was doing when I first got into educating. And then just this past year, like I'm at my 1-year anniversary of not shooting any weddings anymore and focusing purely on kids and maternity. So
wow. How do you like that change?
I love it. I'll talk more about that later probably, but yeah, I've really, really enjoyed it.
Good.
Wow. So 10 years ago, you dove right into one of the scariest parts, I think, for a lot of people is the weddings. We're coming close to right around the 10-year mark for me, where I had a big, huge real estate company. I financially lost everything. I had to reinvent my life. And I remember the first wedding that I had. So if you're going to talk more about that in a bit, but I just remember it being very, very scary. And even though that we have an average price point of over $6,000 now, like it was right around like the $700-800 range, I think is. Not too many people want to admit that, that we all start somewhere,
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear what we're going to be talking about today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
So can you talk with us a little bit more about maybe one of your biggest challenges that you had to deal with in your business and how you overcame that?
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and I think this is something I've talked about in my CreativeLIVE class too. Actually, if you go to CreativeLIVE and find my class, it's in like the little free preview if you want the full details. But
Awesome.
In 2009, I opened in like 2007 or 2008. And in 2009, I actually had like 6 people in my life die. So in January, it was 2 grandparents within like 5 days of each other. And then another relative, and then my closest cousin in July, and then my brother's best friend in October, and then another friend in December. So it was just like one death is hard enough, but it was like constant grieving and like just numbness, and I couldn't even really begin the grieving phase because so many people were just passing away unexpectedly. And so that was a really big struggle because I was brand new in the business and only self-employed. I wasn't working anywhere else. And I didn't know, I hadn't prepared like an emergency plan of what is going to happen in the case of a tragedy or a personal emergency. And so I was just kind of like a duck. like my brides like had no idea that anything was going on, but under the surface I was just like I couldn't function. And so I would show up and shoot the wedding day and be totally normal and good, and then I didn't have enough like emotional or any kind of energy to give into editing. So I got really, really, really behind in my second year. on all of that post-processing and client communications. And I had no concept of like how much to tell people, and what to share and when to share it and how to share it. And it just kind of blew up in my face. And I spent like years getting back. I think that was kind of before outsourcing editing was really a thing.
Yeah.
So I remember even saying to friends, like, I just need help like with my editing. And they would say, if I knew how to do this, I would totally help. But so that was a really big challenge, obviously. Yeah. And I ended up I think I finally got back on track in terms of like getting my delivery times done when I took a sabbatical and I just stopped shooting all weddings and I just focused on editing everything and getting it back to my clients. Because by that point it was probably like, some of them were waiting like 6 months to 8 months, but in the contract it still just said, I don't know what it said even, it was so long ago, probably like 2 months or something. Yeah. So I think the challenge there, the things that I learned was that it's really important, first of all, to have some sort of a game plan in your back pocket for if something goes wrong and you have no idea. Also to trust like the compassion of your clients, because the majority of people are going to be understanding if you're just honest with them. Yeah. And I just, in the midst of it, you can't think of like how to word this email. So now I have a whole email set up and ready to go in the case that happens again. And I also learned I still do all my own editing because I love that. I'm an introvert. I need that time alone. I can't be shooting people all day, every day. But I do have an editor on call kind of in the case that I do need that. I still want to be able to deliver my clients their work in a timely fashion. And so I have that in the case that I just really can't do it. I can send it off to somebody who already knows my style and can take care of that for me. So.
Yeah. Wow. I'm so glad you talked about this openly because it's something that we all don't really talk about, that we're not all invincible here and we have personal lives. And of course, like when things like that happen in your life, it's going to affect your business. So I'm so glad that, you know, you openly talk about that, because I think a lot of people need to hear that and feel like they're not alone with that.
Definitely. I mean, even if it's just like someone who's pregnant and has a miscarriage or is stillborn or anything like that, like, we're humans. And I think it's hard to remember that sometimes. Like we feel like we have to be perfect, that my client's experience has to be absolutely perfect, but really all it has to be is like open and honest. And for the most part, they'll be very understanding of that. That just reminded me of something else too. What was it? I forget. I'll come back to it. Yeah, so after that whole year of loss in my family, like I mentioned, I had fallen completely behind, and that kind of stayed with me for a few wedding seasons because it's so hard to get back on top of that. At the time I was editing, I was all shoot and burn, so I was editing like 1,000 or 1,200 pictures individually in Photoshop for every wedding. I didn't know any better. I know, it was so bad. So, anyway, but I just felt terrible about the experience that my brides and grooms had with me, because I knew that they deserved better. I knew that their experience did not at all match the experience I had in mind for them, or that I knew that I could and wanted to deliver. So during my sabbatical year, I really prayed over it, and I decided to actually contact each couple again who I really felt had been hurt by that experience. And I looked at how much they invested with me. So if it was like $1,200, I offered them $1,200. If it was like $2,800, I offered them $2,800. And I basically said, I'm refunding this to you in product credit because I now provide product. Wow. So if you haven't ordered any wall art or you haven't ordered albums or anything like that, you can put it all completely towards that. It'll cover your taxes up until the amount that you had paid me. And I just completely, basically, it was a big hit to my wallet, obviously, and some of them didn't even reply, but anyone who did, I just ensured to like take care of them fully as I would have wanted to initially in the post after that, because I just was really, like, my spirit was just unsettled with leaving it the way that it was. And I am a firm believer in ensuring that my clients feel well taken care of. And a lot of them didn't at that point, and I just couldn't have taken care of them. So when I was back on top of things, I really wanted to reconcile with them and offer them that.
Wow. And that's something, I mean, that hits really deep, because I think it sounds like you didn't ask for what you lived through. You know, none of us do when we face different life challenges, but then they come full circle and know, and I think it comes back to like sleeping good at night type thing, that things that, you know, you came full circle, and not only did you give the olive branch of like, hey, I messed up, here's something little. It's amazing that you went back, looked at that value of investment and said, look, I want to be right by you.
And it also introduced them to all the products I was then offering. But also I'm a firm believer that like, if as a business, if I deliver exactly what my client expects, then they'll be pleased. If I mess up somewhere and like go above and beyond to fix things, then they'll be my biggest fan for the rest of their lives. It's like if you go to a restaurant, and even if it's like the finest restaurant in the world and you get exactly what you expect, you'll enjoy it and you'll go home and maybe you'll say, yeah, I had dinner at this place this weekend. But if you're somewhere and they somehow mess up, even in the smallest way, like I was at a hotel in Arizona in Phoenix, and they messed up my order very like small. They added spinach into my salad and I can't eat spinach. So I just said like, oh, this wasn't like listed in the ingredients. Would it be possible to have it made without spinach? He then like delivered me a full-size salad. That was just my side salad, a full-size salad with chicken on top, a dessert, a free drink, and another main course. And they treated us to breakfast the next morning. Are you serious? Like, and
where was this hotel?
I know, right?
I know. It was in Phoenix. So it was just like that kind of an experience. You don't expect someone to go that far above and beyond. And if he had just like fixed my salad without spinach, I would have been totally happy. But they went that extra mile to go above and beyond. And obviously, like every time we're in Phoenix now, we'll probably stay there. So
absolutely.
That's great. Yeah. That's a great story.
So I would say like, if you mess up, it's not the end of the world. And in fact, you have a great opportunity to delight your clients and win them as clients forever.
Love it.
Perfect.
Love it.
Great. Thank you for sharing that story. And I just want to follow with what Melissa said too, because definitely in the social media world, there's this perception of perfection all the time. Like people, every social media space, when we all look at somebody's external, you just see like, wow, they're just like their worlds are perfect. They have no issues or anything. And then internally it can really start getting to us because we're starting to compare and we're dealing with real life things going up and down. But those other people that were aspiring, like they necessarily don't project it. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not living through their own challenges. So I think it's really, really key because 10, 20 years ago, we wouldn't have had all that extra pressure. We would have confided with our friends. They would have reached out. We would have gotten on a phone. We would have visited. And now it's like, oh, we don't want to like seem like we're emotionally up and down. So then we don't post because it's like, we don't want to put that publicly because it could think that it's going to hurt our business. So now we're like, now we're isolated.
Yeah. And actually, so I remembered one more thing, the thing from before. But on that note, like again, this fall, so my family is very, very, very blessed. Like I come from a very good family, but also blessed with longevity. So I counted, and as of 2 years ago, we had, I think it was like 18 or 19 people in their a couple in their late 80s, and most of them in their 90s. Like there aren't many families like that. And I guess we're very close. So like my Nana had 6 brothers and all of them were alive except for one who I think passed away due to the war or something like that. But they all of her brothers and all of their spouses, except for my papa, lived into their 90s. And so this past, was it November or October? We've kind of been waiting for that like waterfall of, we love that they're all still around, but we know that there's going to be a time that it's just like funeral after funeral. And that happened for a little bit in November. We had 3 or 4 funerals within a month. And again, it wasn't necessarily like super close to me, but it's my Nana's siblings. And like, I wanted to be able to be there to support her. And so that took me a bit away again. And I didn't share about that much on social media actually, because it wasn't like, I wasn't emotionally drained by it. But it did take that time away.
So by having that plan B email pocket at that point, so you're
Yeah.
prepared for that because it's interesting because not in that your specific path, in our own way, we've had situations like we had a situation 2 years ago. We were driving to a wedding, no joke, our motor blows up on I-95.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like no joke, right? And just that rapidly though, we always had a backup photographer on call, just in case anything ever happened. That was mainly focused on the health thing, but we always made sure that one of our associate photographers was available. So we contacted them and they came pick us up and took us to the wedding.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
This is like free, like Uber.
Yeah.
So today
Yeah.
I think Uber.
Yeah,
But,
it's something that you don't want to think about, but I'm so glad that you talk about it because it's important to have those backup plans and procedures in place. So, yeah.
So that's actually like my CreativeLIVE class that I did a couple of years ago was all about like how to organize and automate a better customer experience. And I start by tackling all of that.
Yeah.
How to ensure that you're taken care of, or your clients are taken care of in that situation. Now, the other thing I was going to mention before was that also when I started, I basically just like from the outside looked at the way that the photographers in my city were running their businesses and thought, okay, so I'll basically offer the same things as them, add a little bit more and lower the price because I didn't have the same experience as them. And I thought like that would set me up business-wise. And the issue with that is that, number one, it took me like 4 or 5 years to clue into this because I just wasn't thinking about it. Most of them were married couples. So it's like 2 people delivering that service and I'm just me. Like it didn't even occur to, like I wasn't working with staff back then or anything like that. And so the fact that I thought that I could deliver pictures in the same amount of time as this other like married couple who are both working on them or whatever, like you don't know what's going on behind the scenes if they're outsourcing all their editing and they have it back within a week. So it's hard, just like don't get into comparing because you have no idea what's going on. Plus my number one mentor back then, who would go out for coffee meet with me once in a while and chat about things, isn't even a photographer anymore. Like he's not in business.
Yeah, right.
So, and I mean, that was his choice. He had kids and wants to be home and have a salary and all of that. But you just don't know, like if you're just copying a business structure from the exterior without actually speaking with the people, you don't know how long they're going to be around or anything like that. So
absolutely. I think that's fairly smart advice. So in your experience with everything that you've gone through, what have you found to be some of the best marketing strategies for you, your business and everything, you know, everything that you've gone through and kind of figured out along the way?
Well, the very first thing that comes to mind is when I was starting out as a wedding photographer. Literally, guys, like I did a business course through our government here, and it was like an 8-month course, and we were all expected to launch our businesses at the end of it. And I bought like a camera like 3 months into that. I knew that I wanted to do this before I even owned the gear. Although I had access to it. I had a film camera before. I was into photography before, but so my very first year I had 9 weddings booked and I had never shot a wedding before. Like I shot my first newborn session like in September, and then I booked all these weddings through like Christmas and New Year's and whatever, and then had 9 on the books. And they were all charged like pretty decently. I remember like the first one that signed for $1,200 and I was like, oh my gosh, they're paying me $1,200. But I did that through one very clever technique, which was I became a certified wedding coordinator, which then linked me with every single wedding coordinator across the country. And then anytime I did any kind of shoot, I'd say like, hey guys, look at what I did this weekend. And they'd see like my kids' photography and other like couples photography and stuff like that. And they all would come to me with their clients. And so that worked extremely well for the wedding side of things.
That's wonderful. That's really smart. It's kind of just a way to get yourself exposed to just that realm of people.
And it's all just about like networking and meeting the right people who can connect you to the people that you need to know to get hired, right? So
and we always recommend to as a photographer to go in and like to the wedding venues and the wedding coordinators, but you actually got like in the inner circle of them.
Because they have,
which I think is a whole different layer.
They have a forum, at least in Canada. They have a forum that's like not on Facebook or anywhere. It's just for the certified wedding coordinators.
Nice.
And so, and then once I started shooting weddings, or if I was like assisting a wedding coordinator, then I'd take my camera and shoot for her own portfolio and give them the photos. And then I would go in the forums and say, hey, I second shot for so-and-so this weekend. Here's some like beautiful shots from that weekend. And then again, they're constantly seeing that. And I was the only photographer in there at the time doing that. So it worked really, really well. And it was, other than the fee of becoming as like the course, it worked really well. And then it also gave me that edge on other photographers, because I could say like, I'm also certified as a wedding coordinator. I don't do that professionally, but I've been trained in like everything that they have been. So I'm a great resource for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It gives you that extra edge. It sets you apart. So love it. So for a photographer that's just starting off in their business, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, I have some notes. I would say first, like, be sure that you are completely solid in photography yet. And that doesn't mean that you are the best photographer in town, but know that you, for whatever you're being hired for, you're confident in any situation that could arise. And just to say, like, oftentimes we'll see people posting in Facebook groups saying like, I did this shoot and I had no control over the lighting and now the pictures are terrible. Like, how can I salvage this? Like, hopefully you would know how to salvage it before you shoot it. And I think to offer services professionally in something that you aren't completely solid in is kind of, so that would be my first advice, is like, get solid on the photography side. Once they are done that, what I did for like the first 6 years, I just shot everything that would come my way. And you don't have to do it for 6 years, but if you don't have a lot of experience shooting things, like I did newborns, product photography for websites, anniversary dinners, like everything you can imagine. And in my 7th year, I took off a sabbatical for the whole year, just to step back and say, okay, for the last 6 years, here's what my business looked like. Here's where I'm at. Where do I want to be 7 years from now at my 14th anniversary? And that's when I decided to specialize in weddings. So at some point, once you've shot, like, have a good sense of like what you enjoy and what you dislike, then find that specialty and focus on that. And then as soon as you're ready to launch your business side, which would probably come before this part, study business. Get a mentor. Yeah, get a mentor and study business, because I have seen, there are 2 young women who contacted me and when they were in high school, both looking to second shoot for me. And one of them emailed me and she was like, hey, like, I'm so-and-so's best friend. And so-and-so was like a kid that I used to babysit. She was like, I was just wondering if I could second shoot for you. And I was like, who is this kid? Like a 15-year-old asking me to second shoot for weddings. And I looked up her portfolio and it was stunning. And now I think she's like still just selling cell phones in the mall. And this is like probably 10 years later. And because she didn't at all understand the business of it. She is so talented photographically, but not on the business side.
Right.
On the flip side of that, the other young woman who contacted me, she's now, at least a year or 2 ago, was in New York City apprenticing with Annie Leibovitz.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's just like, both of them had equal talent, both really into fashion photography. And one of them is like killing it in New York and the other one is just like here in her hometown selling cell phones.
Yeah.
So just be super solid in the business side. And that doesn't mean like copying. There's so many business structures out there that are successful. So find the one that feels right for you and then do that, because that's the way you'll be most successful. And find a mentor, whether that's me or these guys or whoever, just someone that you can click with.
Love it. Love that.
Good. I think a lot of people are afraid these days to reach out to photographers. If you go in a lot of local like Facebook groups, I think they get scared because they see the established people going back and forth doing critiques and everything else, and it gets overwhelming. I'd say through the years we've gotten hit up a little bit for mentorship, and we've really enjoyed, because we had several people that were more like interns and coming through and everything. There's a little different vibe, and the only thing I want to add there is just be appropriate with how you approach an established photographer, because some of them come right out and just assume and expect like, hey, I know you spent 15 years learning what you do, and I just want to learn it all and take from you. You know, it's like, you got to come with the point of like, hey, how can I give? You know, and in return, you're going to receive. You know?
Yeah, I spent about like an hour or an hour and a half chatting with one person on Facebook, just like encouraging them and helping them. And then when they inquired about like, oh, can we do this again? I referred them to my mentorship page. And then they got angry with me for wanting to charge them.
Right.
And then went into like a mutual Facebook group and complained that no one's willing to help. And I was like, I literally just gave you like an hour and a half of my time for free. Yeah, like it's part of, like, I love to teach and I love connecting with people. And like, I just really, really enjoy seeing other photographers come into their own and blossom in their businesses. But like, that takes a lot of time on our part and a lot of energy. And
absolutely.
And yeah, there needs to be some sort of a trade there, whether that's whatever that looks like.
Right. No, we 100% agree, because you know, just like what you did, these people get a chance to skip 10 years of trial and error in the tens of thousands of dollars and probably the thousands and thousands of, you know, hours that you spent getting up to that point.
Yeah.
You get to shortcut all that and get the, like, boom, go right there and get the right information so they don't make all the same mistakes.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't realize like it's probably more of an important investment than probably that next lens that they're looking at, or that lighting gear that they don't know how to use yet.
Definitely. And actually the other thing, the one thing that I do, it's like my gauge in terms of buying new things or expanding or anything. I ensure that like I've outgrown whatever, like I don't do anything until I feel limited by what I have. So I actually shot, this is so terrible. I shot my first, like, I don't know, 4 years of weddings and portraits and everything on a D80, Nikon D80 with the kit lens and like one $150 lens. Like that's it. And like an off-camera flash. But I didn't upgrade until I felt like it was actually limiting me, because for a long time I needed to like grow into that and just learn how to use it. So even now, I only just got a studio because I felt limited by the space that I have. And I'm 10 years in, and I mean, some photographers would get a studio in their first year, but I was still completely happy shooting the way that I was. As soon as I felt limited by it, that's how I know, okay, it's time to expand this, because it's so easy to blow cash on everything.
That's such good advice.
And I think it's something that happens kind of way too often in our industry. And it might attribute to, you know, it's great. We don't have that requirement in the States. Like you had this very extensive business class that you were able to take and get that knowledge in advance of starting a business. So you were really ingrained on, hey, let's make this sustainable. Because we see people all the time opening up studios and they're like, okay, what do I do to get people here? And it's like, you know, like you should have been feeling that pressure for you to need to open the studio to solve problems that you've created. You know? And then the studio should be the solution at that point. You know?
Definitely.
We just feel bad because we see those people struggle for a year or so, and then all of a sudden they're closing their studio for the wrong reasons. Because a lot of us, through the years, I close their studio for the right reasons. Like you do the numbers and you look at it and it doesn't make sense, and you're like, wow, it costs me X amount of dollars a year. But again, it's a business decision. It's like it's something smart. But we're all on a journey. So that.
And that's the thing, like each journey is different. And like for you guys, you had a studio first and then decided to close it. And and when I first started, I would have laughed at you if you ever told me that I would have a studio, because I really loved that outdoor, like the more candid shots. And I was like, no, I'll never do studio work, but I love it now.
That's awesome.
It's wonderful.
I feel like we had the best of both worlds, because years ago we had a co-op studio that we owned and we sold it to one of our members. And we went and we built our own really high-end studio. And it came full circle that ironically, what made the most sense for us, we actually rent the studio from the guy that I sold the studio to. So we're paying less than like the cable bill, you know, for the internet service amount per month. Because most of our work is all corporate. It's all on location. And for those small amounts that we had to do actually in studio, because we're normally in the car driving, on location for, high volume or branding shoots and things. So it just didn't make sense. Like to meet somebody at the studio when we're paying like a couple $1,000s a month for, it's like we went backwards. It didn't make sense financially.
Yeah. And for me, it was more like in October, I was thinking, like in a year or two, I could see myself really wanting a studio. I've been shooting in my living room. I'm home right now. I'll see how big it is. I have blankets everywhere because it was freezing in here. But I was shooting on this wall. So I have that big window there.
Yeah.
We just had that window put in so you can see that the snow. And then I just moved the couch and I shoot right there.
Wow.
Yeah.
And but I put a hole in the wall moving the couch back. And I was like, honey, I think it's time I get a studio. But so I just thought, well, I approached it the same way that I did when we were buying the house, which was I want to be very familiar with the market so that when the right thing comes up, I can jump on it and there's no question. And so the first day, I was thinking like a year or two out, and the first day I was on like looking at the commercial real estate, I was going through pages and pages, and all of a sudden I saw this space and I was like, oh my gosh, but it's not a year from now. Like, what's going on? And then it was just perfect though. And the area is really under construction right now. So they've been trying to lease it out for months. So the price is like dropped probably by 25%.
Yeah.
Nice.
And it's the perfect location, and it's a beautiful building, completely onto brand and everything. And one of the other businesses in it, he owns it, and he's a very high-end like kind of chiropractor, so he keeps it completely beautifully manicured. There's parking, it's in the heart of the city across from a park, so everything was right. And I was just like, is this really happening? Like but yeah.
Oh, congratulations.
It's great that you had a clear vision of what that was going to be, because I think some people just stumble upon a location and they try to make it work.
Yeah.
My real estate background, it always came to location. That's the old saying. So, and for you, I mean, it's coincidental, like it happened quicker than you thought, but just something you knew, the location and a certain type of client you want, a certain type of traffic, down to the parking, like all these things, all these elements, before you just pulled the trigger on going anywhere. Like you already knew this before you started the search.
Love it.
Yeah. And we crunched the numbers to ensure that I'd have, because I haven't had any kind of like real, like I haven't had a studio for 10 years. So I haven't really had any kind of commitment to ongoing fees. So we crunched all the numbers and ensured that I'd have about, what was it, like 6 or 8 months rent, like up, like all the business expenses, like everything that goes along with it, plus the startup cost and everything. So it isn't like we just saw it and jumped in and then I'm like, okay, now I need to make money. But so I'm pretty excited about it. But it's definitely, there are things about it that I'm like, the ceilings are only, I think, 8 feet. And I always hear like that's bare minimum. So maybe in a few years I'll feel the need to get a bigger, like higher space. However, I shoot mainly kids, so they're tiny.
We've been able to pull off beautiful headshots of tall people standing in 8 feet. You definitely have to get creative with your modifiers and everything.
Well, and honestly, like for headshots, often one of the things that I do is I have them kneel because the angle is just really nice. So again, they'll be kid height.
You're bringing everybody down.
That's great.
Yeah, because I'm short. So
the only thing I want to say real quick though, because you said it so quickly, that, and again, it comes back to the business knowledge and experience that you got, is that you stated, like you crunched the numbers and you had approximately about 8 months in reserves that you knew that you're not going in day one saying, I need X amount of people to have to come in the door. Yeah. So then you're under this negative pressure. Instead, you have what we call as positive pressure, where you don't want those funds to deplete, but it's a nice blanket to have, so you can go out and make smart decisions instead of being in a scarcity mode and going out there and doing fire sales and giving away your value and anything just to get any money in, just to pay your bills. And now you're just constantly, this rat race. So it's something that very well thought out, which I commend on that.
Definitely. Thank you. And on top of that, my like base package is the price of 1 month rent.
Oh, wow.
So literally, and I mean, they can go all a la carte and some people might, but most people are at the very least in my base, the majority of them are in my middle collection.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that set up as well so that I can, like, if I need to, like, say I get pregnant or something, like all I have to do is shoot once a month and I'm pretty much guaranteed to be able to pay my rent.
That's great. That's great.
In worst case scenario. Yeah.
Smart.
So fun question here now for you. If you had to relocate to a new area today with no clients and no one knew who you were, and you had $1,000 in your business bank account, what would you do with that money to start to market your business?
Yeah, so I would join all the business associations. I mean, it would depend on who my target audience is.
Yeah.
But I have talked a lot about kids and maternity, but I do also, I'm about to launch a full headshot website. So I would join all the business associations, get linked in with all of the other small business owners in the city, offer, like what I just did. Everyone in my building, I've offered complimentary headshots to. And I worded that specifically so they get one headshot. If they want more, they can buy them. Yeah, just network and like give into the community. And like right now, like, you know, my target audience is kids.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I started doing, because even though I'm not new to the city, like I've lived here my whole entire life, I'm new to focusing on children and maternity. And so one of the things that I do actually every Tuesday morning is I go to my church and they have this massive indoor playground. It's gigantic and it can hold like 160 people or something. And I volunteer there. So every morning during the week it's open. So I go and volunteer with another woman and we open it up and just kind of like oversee everything. And that connects me with like all the young moms who don't have to work
Yeah, that's
in our city because, and it's like freezing cold outside. So the majority of them come there and then I can network and just like hang out with them and get to know them. And then they're like, oh, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a children's photographer. And then they ask to see my work. And so that's one way. I would also like, I'm a Christian, so I would get plugged into a church and possibly like volunteer in the kids ministry, or again, just get plugged into the community. That's my number one market. And so whether it's another faith-based organization or the YMCA kind of a thing. And the other thing I would do, is it here? Here they are.
You got all kinds of surprises for us today.
Well, before doing all of that, I would, which is where the money would actually go. Obviously, like joining a business organization would also have some sort of a fee, but I have these little gift cards. So it just says Hannah Marie Photographer with some of my favorite children's portraiture on it. And on the back, it has all the information, but they're $600.
Nice.
And that covers 2 of my like matted 8x10s. And so if I meet someone who I think is a target client, then in this new city, quote unquote, I always carry a couple of these around in my handbag so that if I meet somebody that I know would be perfect, I say, you know what, why don't you come in? I don't charge a session fee. I know a lot of people do, but I'm just kind of doing an experiment for the year to see how it works. And they do pay a $500 booking fee, but I return that in full at the beginning of their ordering session. So if they don't like anything, they can walk away like with no loss. Yeah. And so for them to get a $600 card means that they could technically come and do a shoot and only walk away with those 2 prints. And if they do, that's fine because they at least loved 2 and they'll be raving about it to everybody that like, you know, but it doesn't devalue me because it's $600 and most of the time they would buy at least my minimum collection. So I think as a new person in the city, that would be a great way to even just show your work and get people in the seats, because once they've experienced the experience you deliver, they'll be able to refer that and talk about it within the community.
That's great.
And from what you're saying, you have a couple of them that you keep with you all the time, which means not like you're putting them out in random places and spinning around. You're engaged in a conversation. You know, this person is a person of influence. You know, your target, you know, client, and that's where you're gonna, you know, bring this card out. You're not just like, leaving in some random laundry.
$600 is a lot to leave around.
Exactly.
Yeah. So for example, like I joined a new book study at my church this past fall, and I gave one to like the 4 women in my group. They all have kids in my target market. And just as a little Christmas thing, I said, like, thank you so much for everything that like my spirit has been so fed this fall, like through meeting with you ladies. And honestly, like so much of my business development has happened from September until now in terms of how it looks today. And a lot of that was because of that group. And so I just said that to them. I was like crying and I was like, so I want you guys to come in and be my first, that I'm shooting in my studio. And yeah, so just being intentional and making that connection and knowing that they are likely a good target client.
I love
Great,
that.
great.
I love that.
Yeah. The old saying goes, you get by giving.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
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 Nobody's going to complain if you make them feel good. So, yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
So is there something that you do on a daily basis or a success ritual or that you think contributes to your success? You've already told us a lot of really good information of things that, you know, as far as with making connections and talking with people, but anything else that you do?
It's kind of funny that you asked that, like, not that like the general world would see as a success ritual, but in my quiet times in the morning, a lot of the time when I'm like studying the Bible, it's just like things are so applicable to business.
Mm-hmm.
So even in one of my classes, I talk about just earlier this week, I've added this into my class for a few of them this year, but the story of like Hagar, and this angel comes to her and asks like, here you are at this well, like identifies where she is, asks her, where did you come from and where are you going? Like every business person needs to ask themselves that at least once a year. And it's like things like that I'm like studying the Bible and it's just like, oh, this is so applicable to my business.
Absolutely.
It might sound weird, but like honestly, that's like where I get a lot of my inspiration from in terms of that. That's also like what gave me the courage to try no session fee, because it just feels right in my spirit. Like I was really excited about it. I was on the fence for a while, but like in church one day, it was just like, okay, I have to do this. Or yeah, just so many things like that. Even that spirit of servanthood that Christ teaches about. It's all about like giving and serving. And if your business is all about like trying to get people in and get their money, you're going to feel some sort of shame about that or guilt or something that you aren't worth it. But if it's all about serving them and serving them well, then they're just compensating you for the work that you've done for them.
Right.
I'm getting goosebumps. I love that. I love that. Just giving and giving and it will come back to you. I truly believe that. So love it. Is there a business resource or a tool that you use on a daily basis that you absolutely can't live without?
Yeah, well, 17 Hats.
We love
yes, we love them.
They are like my sanity. They're also like switching from a wedding focus to family focus was so much easier because I just had to hop in there and like change a few wordings and emails, and you know, like it was, my workflows didn't have to be completely reconstructed. And they're such an awesome team. Like the people over there are amazing. The other thing, I don't use it daily, but whenever I'm in a sales meeting, I do Fundy, and they literally like make me so much money every year because in my in-person sales, I run it in the family's house. And if they're thinking of 8x10s and I say, okay, great. So what wall are you thinking of putting that on? And then they'll think like, oh, maybe over the fireplace. Then I show them an 8x10 matted over their fireplace. And then I say, okay, so what portrait would you like there? Right. And they look at it and they're like, oh, that's way too small. And then they like drag it to be the right size. Like a 20x30 or a 40x60, like whatever size it is. And they're like, oh, that's way better. And like, meanwhile, their price goes up by like 1,000 every like size they go up or whatever. So yeah, because of Fundy, my very first in-person sale, this was a return client. The most they had ever spent with me for digitals was probably like $225, and they've been coming to me since like 2007. Yeah. And she was my very first one, and I was a little nervous, and it was a $3,600 sale because of Fundy. Wow. So I mean, I don't use them daily because I don't do sales meetings daily, but they're a big one.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we love Fundy as
Absolutely.
well. So
Yes.
that's
yes.
great to hear.
And last but not least, what are you working on now, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, well, I just launched the Portrait Community, which is a Facebook group, and it's all focused on portraiture. So in December, I hosted interviews with Jerry, Melissa, and who else was in there? Bambi Cantrell, just a whole bunch of people focusing on the print competition. In January, I was focusing on marketing and had a whole bunch of people, including you guys, interviewed. So all of those interviews are available in the video section of the Facebook page, but that's something I'm really excited about. And also just all my speaking gigs and venturing into my new studio.
So exciting.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
This is going to be a really exciting year for you. I can just feel it.
Yeah, the past several have been pretty exciting. So yeah, it's been great.
I'm really excited just to see, again, the growth. We're being part of your community and talking to your audience as well. It's just an incredible group there. And also with you coming on today, again, this comes back to the serving and really want to swing back around and thank you, because a lot of us are busy and taking this time, that we really love and want to give back and help other photographers. And, because a lot of us are, we're solopreneurs, and we could be one of these stages that we talked about, even at the beginning of the conversation, that we could be struggling with external things that are impacting us, and we feel isolated, alone. And it's nice that, because I feel like with your group is similar to like our audience as well, is that we try to create a really safe place for people to be open. And you don't get that, especially in this day and age with social media and people trolling and, don't know who these people are that are giving you critiques. And, it's unfortunate, but it's just great to have such a synergy. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
Yes.
And I do offer, obviously, private coaching and mentoring too. So if anybody's interested in that, they can also find me there.
Excellent.
Do you have a URL or anything, a website?
Yeah. My website is hannahmarie.ca, and I'm Canadian, so that's not a typo. I'm asked that all the time. I sent my information to Ben Shirk for my interview with him in December, and he was like, "Is that a typo?" And I was like, "No, I'm Canadian." And also the portrait community is just facebook.com/groups/the portrait community.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hannah. We really appreciate it. And we're really excited to see what happens for you this year.
Thank you. It was great to chat with you guys.
Thank you.
And I'll see you guys at Shutterfest.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Let me,
So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. We'll edit out